Hi everybody. Today we'll be looking at the program we'll be using throughout the semester. It's a web-based program called Cloud9. As the name suggests, Cloud9 is a cloud-based Linux computer or Linux virtual machine or Linux VM. So it enables us to build these VMs, and these VMs have 512 megabytes of memory and 1 gigabyte of storage. This is big enough to run a database server and maybe have 5,000 entries without a problem. But you may be thinking, hey, wait a minute, why not use our laptops? Our laptops have far more resources than this 512 megabyte of memory. It might have something like 8 gigs of memory, 512 gigs of maybe a solid state drive. So why not use those instead of this system of Cloud9? Wouldn't that make more sense? Well, there's a number of compelling reasons to use Cloud9. The first one is, let's say we go with the approach of using laptops. We've done this a number of years ago in this class. So 2 sections, so that makes 50 different students or 50 different computers or actually 50 different configurations. People have different versions of operating systems. They have different programs installed on their laptops. So this creates a bit of a problem. So when we install the things we need, maybe it'll work for 50 of the laptops, but not others. And then we have to debug what's different about them. So this leads to a lot of frustration. Frustration that continues throughout the semester as updates of the operating system are automatically installed and things break. And again, we're debugging and trying to figure out, well, why isn't it working? So frustration. With Cloud9, we are using one basic, it's basically the same box, a Linux machine. So that really tends to decrease this amount of like, why does it work for you and not for me kind of frustration. The second thing is Cloud9 allows us to do kind of sharing. So we can work with a team on a shared project. We can all be editing in the same IDE, different files, all at the same time. And we could be doing that same approach using the laptops with such technology as Dropbox. That's a pretty handy and convenient thing. Or maybe we'd use Git. But these also lead to hassles. You edit a file, I edit a file, there's some incompatibilities. So it still leads to some frustration, even though they're great tools. With the sharing idea of everyone on the same machine, it reduces frustration and it reduces suffering. So instead of kind of concentrating on trying to debug all these problems of these different versions of computers and hassles with different versions of files, we can really concentrate on what the class is about, what the class material is. Finally, the third benefit of using Cloud9 over our laptops is that this whole class is about developing data-driven web-based applications. Using it on laptops is kind of okay. We can show people what we're doing on our laptop, but it's much cooler to do it kind of in the cloud, so it's visible to anyone with the URL. So these are good reasons, and there are many others for using Cloud9. There are other systems like this that we could use. One is called Coding with a K, and the other we used a few years ago called Nitrous.io. They're basically the same as Cloud9. Cloud9 has some nicer features, I think, so we're going to be going with that. So, to summarize what Cloud9 is, it's a virtual machine, a cloud-based virtual machine, and it's also an IDE. So there's an editor built in and some other tools that help us develop programs. Let's go to the real world here and check out Cloud9. Before I do that, let me just log into LastPass, my account here. All right, cool. All right, let's go to Cloud9. That's c9.io. And before we sign up, or which we can do with our GitHub, if you have a GitHub account, you can just sign up using that way. Let's just take a look at the pricing information here. So we're using this free tier. That enables us to have numerous free public workspaces or free public virtual machines. Only one can be on at a time, but it enables us to switch. So we might have a workspace to do just some testing out for things you're interested in outside of class. By public, they mean that anyone can look at any of the files that are in that workspace. So anyone can look at your source code, for example. So what I'm asking is for any assignment where you get points for, so these projects, I'd like you to use a private workspace, and you get one of those in the free tier. And you should be able to fit all your projects that are for this class in that one private workspace. You can always change workspaces, so you can make one private and change it to public and get a different one private. But that's the free tier. And as you see, as you pay more money, you get additional things. One thing I should mention up front is that Cloud9 is great for development. It's a wonderful development tool, but it's not intended to host a website. So if you develop a great web app and you need to host it, you're not going to be doing it on Cloud9. Or even if you do a project for the software engineering class, you're not going to put that project as a permanent home on Cloud9. You might develop on Cloud9, a great development environment, but if you're hosting a site, you'll probably use something like DigitalOcean, a great, easy-to-use site. You can get a free account or free money to create virtual machines in DigitalOcean. You can use Amazon Web Services. You can get a free 1-year micro instance, so a server that's running all the time for 1 year for free if you've never used it, Amazon Web Services before, and other services like that. So those would be good hosting sites. This is not. If you're just looking to host a blog, GitHub would be the best place to do that. That's free forever, and it's very easy to use. As you'll see, we'll discuss these in future videos. So we're going to be using this free account. So why don't you guys go ahead and sign up for a Cloud9 account, and then so pause the video, and when you're done with that, come back and we'll continue. All right, welcome back. And I realized I want to just emphasize something about that I don't want to prevent people from doing smart stuff. So I want to just talk a bit about and go back and talk about this public versus private. And I mentioned when you work on projects, I want you to work on a private space. And that means, what I'm trying to prevent is people just copying one total project, maybe changing a few variable names and presenting it as their own work. And I don't want to prevent people, because I want people to seek help from other people in the class. So, we have a variety of people in the class who have all sorts of expertise in HTML5 or HTML even, in Python, in JavaScript. People who know this stuff better than I do are in this class. And I don't want people kind of to be suffering, who don't know this stuff, to be suffering in their room trying to figure out, well, there was something unclear in the video, or I can't figure out how to continue on this project or whatever, when all this help is available. Obviously, if you're trying to do something for work later on, you're going to get all the help you need to get your project done. Nothing's going to hold you back. You're going to Google stuff, look for information. I don't want you to Google a complete solution to a project, but by all means, Google it, trying to figure out how to do, if you're having problems with an HTML form, seek help in person with people, and, even in our Piazza site, post something that you can get a response fairly quickly. So I'm trying to avoid suffering. There's really no way to be happy in the class and avoid suffering unless you collaborate and help people and get help. So I want to encourage that. I just don't want people to kind of out and out copy an entire solution. And I think people see the difference there. And I really encourage cooperation and support. It'd make the class a lot more fun. So that's kind of what I just wanted to say before we continue here. All right, let me sign in. And because I used LastPass here, it automatically is going to sign me in. I don't know what my password is. It's some super long random sequence of things. All right. So here we have our workspace. You don't have these. These I've created before. And I see I screwed up here, and I already have a private workspace. That's what this little lock is. So let me go there and just change that to public. All right. Well, actually, let me just get rid of that one. I'll delete this workspace. I'll just create a brand new one with that same name. I don't want to keep creating these things. So I'm going to create a new workspace here. And I already deleted one called CS350Z. I'll just reuse that name. And this is a virtual machine for the database class. I'll just reuse that description. Obviously, the description, you can have it whatever you want, just to help you. Here's where we distinguish private versus public. I want this workspace to be private. We can later on say share the workspace with other people, and I'll show you that in a bit. And that's really handy if you're working on a project with another person, so you're doing some partner work. You want to share that space. Private doesn't mean that you can't do that. It just gives you more discriminating ability of, I'll share it with you, but not these other people. Public makes it available to everyone. Well, it says that this will create a workspace for everyone to see. Choose a template, so we can say, I want to do a WordPress site. This would already populate your virtual machine with MySQL, with PHP, all the glue that'll connect those two things together, the WordPress files. If you want to do a Rails project or whatever, what we're going to do is just create a blank one. So I'm going to choose blank here. I think that's good, so I'm going to create it. And this takes a little bit of time sometimes. And sometimes it fails, not very often. So this is creating a virtual machine. All right, and here we are. So it has two panels here. I'm moving this one. This one here is just a terminal. So if you've already logged in and done stuff with one of the department servers, this should be very familiar with you. You can, whatever commands you know in Linux, you can do here. See what processes are running and so on. Go into Python, add two numbers together, get out of Python. So it's just a terminal. And if you really like VI or an editor for some reason, Emacs, you can go ahead and use those here. I use those just when I am restricted, and that's the only option. Usually I use this editor that's built into Cloud9 or a plain old editor on my local machine. All right, so this top part here is the editor window. Before I do that, there is an option here we can all sorts of preferences. We can change the theme to, if you really liked kind of the black on black theme or whatever, you can go ahead and do that. Change the font size. You can make it however you want. I'm sticking with this for now. I think people can easily see this text at this resolution. Well, yeah, I'll just keep it that size. So I'm not going to mess with this preferences, but I just wanted to show you that they were there. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. That's simple enough to create a new file here. And it's going to be a Python. I'm going to create a function that just adds 2 to some number x. And before I get too involved, I'm just going to save this file. So I can do a Command S or however you normally do a save on your machine. Or I can say save here. My first Python file, .py. All right, and as you can see, it does highlighting and does some code syntax coloring. Here's a bug that just popped up in the last few days, and I'm hoping that by the time the class starts, it'll be resolved. But you'll get this error. Oops. Well, two things. One is the unexpected end of file. That's not a problem. We'll resolve that. But you'll get this error, Django is not available on the Python path. And it looks like it's something that just popped up in the last few days when looking at doing just basic Googling on this error. And it'll get resolved. It's not it won't prevent you from doing anything. It's just sort of an annoying to have that red little blop there saying that something's wrong when nothing really is. Okay, this is pretty easy. To add 2 to a number, I'll just return 2 plus whatever that number is. And then I'll print, let's say I want to add 2 to 5. All right. And you can see it was adding parentheses. It does a fairly nice modern job of it. So I'll save that file. And go down here to the terminal. Now I'm in the terminal, as you can see. And the reason I selected such a long file name is I just wanted to demonstrate one thing that a lot of people don't use in Linux, but which is really kind of nice, and that is a completion feature. So if I do a list here of my files, we see there's a README in my first Python file. As long as I type in enough characters that make the file unique, like in this case M actually distinguishes between these two, I can just hit Tab and it just finishes the file for me. So again, I can say, I'll type in a few more characters, my tab, and it'll finish that file. So instead of having to type stuff in, I can just do that. And as you can see, it returns correctly. It's not a big deal. I'm just demoing, how to edit stuff in a file and create a file and so on. You can make directories the same way. Here, make directory foo, and you can see up here in our little file list, it created this directory foo. So it's all as you would expect. Let's upload a file. Sometimes you may want to upload a file from your desktop to or laptop to Cloud9, and that's just upload local files. You can do the new school drag and drop here, but because I'm only video casting or screencasting this Chrome page, it would be kind of weird to all of a sudden have the file magically appear. So let me do old school select files. And you see fib.py, the one I selected, appears here in the file list. It's uploaded. Let me go to that. This is just a little bit longer Python file. I'm just demoing again how you upload files. But here's a Fibonacci function that if you took 110 and did Python, this is how you may have written that in the 110. Later on, as you learn a little bit more about computer science, maybe you'd get a little fancier and do memoization. And that's what I show here in the second function. And down here, what I do is just compare the times, how long it takes to execute Fibonacci 34 using the old school 110 version versus how long it takes to do the memoization version. So it's just basically a little demo. So let's run that. Python, well, again, let me just show you what we have here. I'll do ls. And now F doesn't distinguish between fib.py and foo, so I have to type in a little more here, so F is not enough. But if I type fi and hit tab, I get fib.py. It takes a bit of time to compute Fibonacci 34, and we see that the 110 version's a lot slower. It shows you as we advance in classes how we can get a little smarter and actually create things that are a little bit more efficient. And I might explain why that is in a sec. Take that little detour now. So nothing to do with databases or this class really, but it's an interesting thing in computer science, this memoization, and really useful. So here I'm computing the Fibonacci of 7, and as you can see in computing the Fibonacci of 7, we need to compute the Fibonacci of some numbers multiple times. Like if we take 3, for example, we're computing it here, 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 and up here. So it's 5 times you're computing the Fibonacci of 3 to compute the Fibonacci of 7. So in memoization, we remember the answer for 3. So we can eliminate going down these subtrees. And if we can remember the Fibonacci of 7, we don't have to go through any of this computation. We can just remember that the Fibonacci of 7 is whatever it is. And the Fibonacci of 7, when we're computing the Fibonacci of 34, which is shown in that video, we compute the Fibonacci of 7 this number of times, 317,812. So we can compute in the old school 110 version, we have to do this computation, this tree, this many times. In the new school version where we just remember the result of 7, we just need to compute it once. So you can see that's a huge savings in the amount of computations we need to do. Okay, that's the diversion, and sorry for it. One thing I wanted to show is in this function is up here we have, which sometimes is useful a little bit later in the class, a little indicator of memory, CPU, and disk usage, and it lags quite a bit. So this isn't like perfectly in sync with what's going on, but there's at least a few second delay. But let's observe this while I run fib.py again. And as you see, when I run Python fib.py again, nothing's happening up here. We get the answer, but it's a little bit later that this kind of appears that, oh, we're kind of using some CPU here. We're already done, and so the CPU's back to idle, but so there's a little lag, but it's pretty good. The other thing I wanted to mention while we're up here and focusing on this section is the share option. So here's where we can invite people to do read, write, and access our source code. So again, if you're working on a project later on with other people, this is where you'd invite people to do it. But one that we're going to do right at the start is the application itself. So when we create a web app, and it's be good that other people can actually take a look at it and demo it. So if you're creating a web app, for example, a chat application, if your machine's the only one that can demo it, it's kind of a boring chat application. You'll want to make it available to other people. So we're going to make this application one public. Making the application available to anyone with URL. Sure, why not? So now that's the one change we have to make to this workspace. All right. So that's about it for this Cloud9 workspace. It's a fairly easy thing to use. Give it a shot and check out the next video all about actually how to get a web app up and running. So that's it for now. Take care.